You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, and that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are.
There's not much space for life's big questions.
I don't know. Where am I going in the future?
Not much time set aside for why am I here?
I think we weren't actually made for this life, we were made for a life beyond this.
Is there more to life than this?
Some people dream of finding happiness through money.
Shopping all the time.
Something awakened in me. It was a realization I would never find happiness where I was looking for it.
Where's God in all of this?
I believe humanity needs to believe in something.
Why do bad things happen?
What's the deepest human need?
Why create the world?
We all have different perspectives on the meaning of life.
I don't know.
There's got to be more to it. I've seen more than that.
Alpha is a place where you can be yourself, say what you think, and challenge everything. Each episode unpacks a new topic and gives you time to explore what you think. Try Alpha.
Over the last month or so, we've been looking at this series called From Here to Eternity. We've been looking at it under the premise that we have a life to live from our here to eternity. Whether or not you believe in eternity, that something happens to us after we die or not, for those of us who identify as Christians, as Christ followers, there's a fundamental belief that our mortal bodies, this thing that we carry around, is not the end of us. That after we die, that there is an eternity that we enjoy and be in the presence of God, that's part of our belief. But we're still here, and so eternity is, say, over there, next to all those folks over there. But eternity is there. But what do we do from here to there? And we've been looking at that. And if you want to know a little bit about what we've been looking at, our YouTube channel's again there for you to access that and to have a look. And so today we're going to look at what it is to make plans from here to eternity. Is planning a good thing or a bad thing? And how do we discover God's will in any of those plans? How do we know if it's a good plan or even a God plan? This week's been an interesting, to say the least, an interesting week, hasn't it? And I've had about half a dozen conversations with people and groups about the will of God. How do you discover the will of God? And whose side is God on? Maybe you've had that discussion, particularly at the political environment in the United States at the moment, where both sides are equally saying that God is on our side. Is God a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian? Everybody claims the same God guides them. In sporting contests, there are people with sincere prayers who are praying that their team wins, New South Wales, and there are sincere people who are praying that their team also wins. Two sincere prayers, but where is God's will? Is God's plan to have both teams win? Well, that doesn't work. That's why we have Golden Point, that kind of stuff. So where do you find God's will? I don't know if you find this a tricky area. I find it a really tricky area to be involved. I was going to say it was a meeting with some blokes, but I was playing golf with some blokes on Friday afternoon, and they opened up the question by this, and I thought, they're going to talk about Trump and now all that stuff. But the first thing came out of one of my friends' mouth was in our group is to me, because they know what I do, and they said, so your bloke was looking after the ex-president. I thought, my bloke, you mean God? That'd be my bloke. And I said, before anything came out of my mouth, another person of our group said, well, what about the bloke behind Trump who got shot and he's killed? Does his bloke, that's my bloke, look after him? And for the next half an hour at least, I said nothing, which is unusual for me. They're talking about the will of God. And where is God in all of this? Wasn't in their putting, but it was. We had this general conversation about the will of God, and I don't know if you have to wrestle with that and talk about that, because there's a lot of dumb talk about it, isn't there? There's a lot of really dumb theology about whose side God is on, but it's still a big and daily question that we have to ask from here to eternity. And how do we plan according to God's will? How do we know if it's God's will? I mean, we could look at generalized verses like in the book of Micah, which is the last Old Testament book before the New Testament. Micah happened about 400 years before Matthew, so there's a 400-year gap. But one of the last things that's said in Micah is about human beings seeking God's will, and the response from Micah was, well, here's how you know the will of God. You need to seek justice, you need to love mercy, and you need to walk humbly with your God. Now, that's a beautiful verse of Scripture, but it doesn't give us a lot of detail. How do we plan, and how do we even discover that it might be part of the will of God? A book that 23 million people have bought throughout the world is this book, Atomic Habits. And James Clear, who was an ex-baseball player, outlined the disruption of trying to make plans without changing a process. He said in this book, and I've read this book, I think every member of my family's got a copy of this book, but 23 million copies worldwide, 60 different countries have it, in it he says this, that people who make specific plans for when and where they will perform a new habit, he's talking about habits, are more likely to follow through. So a specific plan is the key. It's not about, oh, I wish I could stop this. You need to make a plan in order to stop this. I have nails because of this book. You can check them out at the door later on. You need to make a plan for a different outcome, you see. So planning is a very integral part of human behaviour, and we do it all our lives. Most every day we make a plan. We plan our days, our relationships, our future. We decide if our plan is a healthy thing to do or not a healthy thing to do. The weightier the goal, the weightier our plans. Benjamin Franklin famously once said, didn't he not, that if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And so a plan is a very important thing. But how do we as Christians hold that intention with God's plan? Because his ways are not our ways and his plans are not our plans. So do we just take this neutral position from here to eternity? Well, I want to talk a bit about that today, about why planning is very important, but wise planning is more important. The Bible teaches us that we are to rely on the plans of God. Now, just dangerously above our drummer today is this verse, where God says, and we probably know this, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Now, that's a much often quoted and stuck on walls kind of verse, if you like, because it tells us a few things. It tells us that God has a plan that he knows and he has for us, but his plan is with the best of intentions. I plan to prosper you, and I don't mean prosper in the sense that you'll buy a new car and a bigger house, but prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. A lot of people connect to that verse because they go, my view of God is such that not only does he have a plan, but his plan for me is a positive plan, a good plan, something that will have good outcomes for me. It'll give me a hope, and it'll give me a future. It'll give me not only a here, but it'll give me an eternity. But how do we hold that intention with the plans that we have, and how do we discover the will of God in all of that? The Bible never speaks about or against talking or making plans. The Bible does speak against making plans without factoring God into those plans. So I want you to turn now to, if you have a Bible, you can look at it at the screen, but it's always helpful to know this isn't just being made up. In James chapter 4, James is in the New Testament, but here's what he says. Now, James, I should tell you, is considered the most practical letter in the New Testament. It gives us all kinds of practical advice and wisdom about how to live our lives. Its Old Testament counterpart is probably the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is a bunch of probabilities. If you do this in life, the probability is that this outcome will happen. Like a probability is you have good nutrition in your life, you will probably have great health. That doesn't mean you absolutely will always have great health, but it will certainly help in the probability of having good health. So James teaches right throughout this letter that to talk the talk is one thing, but to walk the walk is a more important thing. That it's important that we live as we believe. He also points out that we best not talk at all if our walk doesn't match our talk. It's a really great read. It's a very small letter, and I would encourage you to read it sometime just as a letter. It'll take you about 25 minutes, or listen to it on audiobook, or I'll come around to your house and read it to you. It's a really great little letter, but a very punchy letter. So the passage I want to deal with today is this, because James is coming now away from the theory and saying these are the practicalities of your life. So he says to those who are reading, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, let's go into the city and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, whereas you don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. For what is your life? For you are a vapour that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. For you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will both live and do this or that. Now that passage packs a number of things into it. But it goes to how we make plans. I want to mention a couple of those today. The first component is where the arrow is pointing, that we are to be wise planners, or we are to plan wisely. One of the juxtapositions throughout James and many of the books of the Old Testament is the difference between foolish behaviour and wise behaviour. We used to sing a little Sunday school song about that, didn't we? Which is based on that parable that Jesus told about the wise man built his house upon the rock and the foolish man built his house upon the sand. And when the storms of life came, one stood and one washed away. And right throughout this is a theme of the New Testament, the difference between foolish planning and wise planning. So verse 13, the beginning of that passage, has these two words, come now. Now, the word come, before the now, is an imperative, not an invitation. The word now adds urgency to the first word. So it would be, Ian, come down here now. That's what I would hear a lot when I was a kid. And we lived in a one-level flat. I don't know where we come down here now. Ian, come down now here, the chocolate's missing again. Well, that was like last Thursday, so, you know. Come now is an urgent word and often used in correction, usually when I'm involved. But it's addressed to a specific reader who's identified in the book of James as a foolish reader, the one who acts foolishly. You who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. You who say, he confronts you who say, because you who say this are put in the foolish planner kind of box. So let's look at the plan, because it's not a bad plan. The timing of the plan is, well, today or tomorrow. That's fairly specific, today or tomorrow. The place is, we'll go into such and such a town, so they've got a destination in place. The duration, they want to spend a year there. It's not this open-ended ticket where we don't know what we're going to do for how long. The activity is they're going to trade, because it's the allegory is of a business person or a merchant. And the outcome, they're looking for the outcome, and the outcome of business is to make a profit. Regardless of what the multinational companies will tell us, we're not interested in profits. We're interested in bringing the world together, and no, you're interested in profits, basically. So business, yeah, I get that. So it's not a bad plan. If that was a business plan, you'd go, that's a pretty good plan. Today or tomorrow, the timing seems good, the place, the duration, the activity, and even the outcome. But James is not talking about the plan and what it contains. He's talking about what the plan doesn't contain. James criticises the plan and the you who say crowd for what the plan leaves out. And verse 14 will tell us what that's about. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. In Proverbs, the kind of Old Testament counter of James, there's a proverb that says this, that do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Now, boy, do we know that in our lives, don't we? We know that. But still we make plans. We have to make plans for tomorrow. I have a plan for tomorrow. You want to hear my plan? I will arise. People will say to me, Ian, you are going to work, you are but a man. No, I'll rise at about 6:45. I'll have a cup of tea, or a cup of coffee actually. I'll watch some news and breakfast and get ready. Then I'll have another cup of coffee, maybe another breakfast, who knows. Then I'll come up here and I'll sit where James is sitting up the back. I'll debate whether to put the heating on. Probably won't. Put a beanie on. And I'll get prepared for next week and all this stuff. And so far, I got a pretty good tomorrow. I've got a couple of meetings and I've got to do a couple of COG vouchers where I go into people's houses and give them some help from all of you and our op shop so that they can probably put food on the table and pay a little bit off their electricity or gas bills. Then we've got a meeting in the afternoon with a colleague who's, after 30 years of being a pastor, is giving that away. He just said, it just breaks my heart too much. I've got to do something else. I'm in the last third of my life. I just can't do it anymore. So I'll meet with him for an hour, which will turn into probably 2 hours. And I'll debate whether or not I've been of any help to him. And then I'll drive home and get a bit of exercise and have some dinner. That's kind of my plan for tomorrow. It's not a bad plan. That's a pretty good day, isn't it? But I don't know what tomorrow will bring, you see. But I still have to make my plan. The problem with the plan of people who plan foolishly is they don't factor in the presence of God in their plan. Don't presume what tomorrow will bring. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, so you need to make your plans with the presumption that God may change your plans. Because at any moment, my phone will ring, or a text will happen, or something will happen, and all of what I've just said will not happen, except for the second breakfast. So what do? Do I cancel my plan? Well, no, I don't cancel my plan. But I plan knowing that I won't really know what tomorrow. I've got a fair idea. I'm 99% sure that the plan that I've just outlaid to you will happen. Not exactly how I've explained it, but it will happen. So what do? Well, I plan with the presumption that God may change my plan. Jesus said this, that don't be anxious about tomorrow. Some of us are anxious about tomorrow. I'm anxious about a few things I've got to do tomorrow, actually, because I don't know how to talk to this guy, because I love him and he's a great pastor and I want him to stay in ministry, but I don't want my friend to die in a heap because of that. Jesus said, sorry, it's cut off there, but he says, therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for this day is its own trouble, or today will have enough trouble of its own. So wise planners plan with this factor in it. They don't presume. And then James asks one of the big questions of life. And here's the question he asks. What is your life? Not here is your life or that was your life. What is your life? And then he says, for you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Aren't you glad you came to church today to be told that? We often, when we're watching telly or something, I get somebody from 100 years ago or 120 years ago. Quite often Sharon and I remark to each other that, isn't it weird that all those people are gone? They're gone. They were involved in this, they were that, they were fathers, mothers, grandparents, children, whatever they were, but they're all gone in terms of their mortality. There's a graphic picture of this what is your life. Before I get on to that, just let me say that's one of the premises of Alpha. It's asking those big questions. Well, at the end of the day, what is your life? What is it? Is it just to accumulate more shirts? Is it just to shop better? What is it to take that trip? What is your life? Well, Alpha is a great way of asking those questions. Anyway, in Psalm 90, this is a very important passage of Scripture. It says, I'm sorry, it's a bit faded there. So teach us, says the psalmist, to number our days, that we may gain or get a heart of wisdom. Often we don't number our days. We number our years or our decades. But we've got to learn to number our days. I did a really macabre thing the other day. I tried to number my days. Now, I'm a male, thank you. 81.2 years is the average that an Australian male will live, according to stats right now. It's a little older for women because they're just better. And I did the maths on my birthday. This is a bit sobering, this. And so far, up to this day, I've lived 21,515 days. If I live to 81.2 years, I have 8,145 days left. Why don't you get your calculators out and do yours now? But that's what it means to number your days. Now, I can guarantee that I've lived 21,515 days because I've lived them. How many of those 8,145 days can I absolutely guarantee are mine? None. Now, I'm fairly healthy. Don't have too many bad habits. Got rid of one of those. I can't guarantee one of those 8,145 days. Now, I plan to live them all. In fact, I plan to be the pastor of this church for all of them. Well, maybe not all of them. But it's a fairly sobering thing, isn't it? So do that at lunch today. Grab some soup and tell each other how many days you got left. Teach us, I'll get rid of that because that depresses me. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What is your life? What is your life? Theologian once said, like sands through the hourglass, so all are the days of our lives. I'm not too sure if that was St. Augustine or you know, who knows. But the sentiment is true, isn't it? Like sands through the hourglass, so are all the days of our lives. So, you know, I don't want to depress anybody. We're having soup today. But this is the stuff of life, you know. We've got to acknowledge that about each other. So we've got to be wise in our planning. We need to be wise knowing that there are factors far from our control at play. So there was an old tale called The Appointment of Samara by Somerset Maugham about 100 years ago. He told this tale, and it's a story of a servant that goes to a market, and the servant bumps into Death, as you do, and Death makes this, or what the servant thought was a threatening gesture towards the servant. So the servant is petrified, and the servant goes back to his master and asks his master, or pleads with his master, can I borrow your horse because I've got to get out of here because I've just encountered Death down at the market, and he made a gesture towards me. The master lent the servant the horse, and he took off to a place called Samara. The master then went into the marketplace and sought out Death and asked him why he had made such a threatening gesture to his servant. And Death replied to the master, it wasn't a threatening gesture. I was just astonished to see your servant in Baghdad because I have an appointment with him tonight in Samara. It's a cheery story, but it's a story of inevitability, teaching us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So we need to be wise in our plan making and factor in that we are not guaranteed in control of all our days. Now, to flip that, we plan wisely. And the second thing is to trust in God's plan as best as we understand it. Now, trust is a big word. It's a big word. It's a big word for many of us who have either lacked trust or have our trust broken. But to trust God with all our heart and not lean in our own understanding, but in all our ways, all our plans, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. The way that God seems to direct our path isn't with a blueprint of daily things, like do this, make that call, go there, all that stuff. There are general principles and principalities, principles and probabilities that he brings into our lives. The Word of God's helpful for that. Other people are helpful for that. The guidance of the Holy Spirit, as we've talked about and sang about today, help that. But to make wise plans, we need to trust God, to use our brains and our intellects and our skills and our experience and all of that, but at the same time trust in God. I just want to show you something in this verse. We sort of contrast the you ought to say, you who say with you who ought to say. So there's a difference between verse 13 and verse 15, and it's the word ought. We all make plans, but the wise person or the foolish person simply makes plans expecting a guarantee of their plans and outcome. The wise person says, I will make my plans, but I will include God in my plans. In fact, God will be the principal guiding path in my plans. Now, that's not always easy. If the Lord's wills, we should say, we will live this and do that. There's a tension between there. And so often we learn that the hard way, to say this. The person who trusts in their plans alone, well, it's a foolish way to make plans. It just is. Because we're not guaranteed any of the outcomes of the plan. Our confidence is in God's plan, not in our plan alone. You know, in days gone by, people used to end letters putting the word DV on them. I don't know if you still do that. It comes from a Latin term called Deo volente, which means God willing. It's actually taken from this portion of Scripture. So people would inquire about them and give some news about what was happening with their family, inquire about their family and whatever it might be. And at the bottom they would sign their name and put DV, if God willing. So we have this life to live from here to eternity. We should live it and live it to the full. God has given us good things to enjoy. So we should live it to the full from here to eternity. Don't wait till eternity until you enjoy yourself, because God has given us great things to enjoy now. Okay? But we've got to live with DV in our lives. If God willing, we will live. Jesus told a parable about that, didn't he? He talked about a farmer who had this bumper crop, like a big tax return, a huge bumper crop. And a certain rich man yielded this abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, well, what shall I do now? I have no place to store my crops. Not a bad problem if you're a farmer. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build these bigger ones, and then I'll store my supply of grain. That's not a bad plan. If you're being blessed, you need to store it properly. But then I'll say to myself, well, you have plenty of grain laid up for you many years. So now take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry, which is the Epicurean kind of idea of life. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you have prepared. Then who will get for you what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. Now, is that anti being rich? Not at all. It's about not factoring God into those plans, you see. We plan, we trust, and we live. And then we are humble before God because of his plans. One of the very loaded words when I grew up in church was worldliness. Worldliness seemed to be appropriated to all kinds of stupid stuff, like going to the movies or wearing a hat or not wearing a hat or eating whatever it was, whatever it might have been. And it really bothered me, this word, because worldliness was just associated with negativity. But worldliness, when you think about it, is bigger than that stuff. It's actually saying worldliness. It's actually saying that I don't believe God has the whole world in his hands. Actually, I've got my feet resting on the world. I'm Yertle the turtle. I'm the top of the pyramid here. Worldliness is, Kevin DeYoung, is whatever makes sin look normal and righteousness look strange. And there's a whole lot of opinion around there. See, when we plan wisely and we trust God's plan, what it does is it results in a humility in life. And we've got to live humble lives. Now, humble lives doesn't mean doormat lives. It means that we live with a humility that someone bigger and greater with a better plan than ours exists. That we don't have the whole world in our hands. Sometimes we don't have our whole life in our hands. Sometimes we don't have a whole day in our hands. As it is, says James, as you boast in your arrogance, all such boasting is sin. Remember, sin is simply missing the mark. So we miss the mark foolishly when we make plans without factoring in God. Arrogance and pride refuses to say Deo Vonte. It refuses to say God willing. I have a plan and I will execute my plan. And sometimes that plan goes well, but what happens when that plan does not? So what do we do from here to eternity? Well, we plan wisely. We make plans. Hopefully they're good plans. Hopefully they're God-honouring plans. But we always plan with the presumption that God is included in that plan. And we trust God. We trust God as best we can to trust that His plan is better than our plan. And then we humble ourselves before that plan. And if we do that, then often we can do as God has told us to do from the book of Micah. And that is that we can then seek justice, and we can love mercy, and we can walk humbly with God.